Hello,
But
folks. My name is Dr. Hal Bradley, and welcome to the Break It Down Show. Hi, Pete.
that's how we do it. Hey, man, how are you?
Good, thanks.
Okay, so I've been calling in my experts from around the greater BIDS world, and I guess what I'm going to do with you today is talk to you a little bit about. Look, it's one thing to like I love or I hate the president. I disagree or agree with this policy. It's a whole different world when you say I'm going to send U.S. troops to go down to the border and try to take care of these cartels. You and I
Right.
both. I've had a not just you, but I've had another person who did smuggling for the cartels, and he's like, it's a business, and whoever the president is, okay, sure, we change how we do business, but you don't stop the business. You don't turn off the demand. We have other ways of doing things, and so I wanted to discuss with you how might the cartels respond to look, and we don't know is the force going to be just plussing up the border patrol? Is it going to be a military force? It's a lot of legal things, right? And the terrorist designation is key to unlock certain areas where you can't easily put U.S. troops with ammo. So I want to ask you about what are your thoughts when you hear the U.S. military is going down to the border? How's the cartel going to respond?
Very good question, and I have a very good answer for you. But first, for your audience, like to explain why you've asked me on this show today. Ladies and gentlemen, 30 years ago, I walked in, ending a criminal enterprise that went on over 15 years of my life. I was directly involved with the Sinaloa drug cartel. I was an international smuggler, later became a high level trafficker for them in the Pacific Northwest. Ultimately became the primary target of the Department of Justice under Operation Northern Exposure. At the time that I walked in because I couldn't break away from a life that I needed to break away from. So I made a decision to go to war with that world. So, that in context being understood, as Pete fully knows my life story, 15 years on one side of the fence in the cartels, 17 years as an undercover operative for the Department of Justice, operating in multiple countries. So, yes, Pete, I do have a basic idea of my opinion on how they would interpret these recent events in government change. Number
Okay.
one, there is no question in my mind at all. The cartel is not afraid of the Department of Justice. They are not afraid of our military. They are not afraid of an executive order labeling them now and formally causing them to be an element of a terrorist organization. What they're going to do, in my opinion, is what I saw them do growing up in a village as a child in Mexico, later coming up through the ranks of the cartels itself. They're going to evolve, Pete. That's what they're going to do. There's going to be no fear. There's no intimidation. There's no powerful enough in their eyes that they can't overcome or conquer. And a lot of this is based on the contacts and the resources they have within the country of Mexico themselves. The more money they dump into the political forum, the more power they're going to receive with regards to political retaliation about any attempt the United States of America may or may not have in the planning phases right now of coming after cartels in Mexico. I don't see that as happening, although I've got to say that I have worked and operated around the CIA, NIH. I've worked with other agencies down there, and there are covert things that are being done every day. As you well know, you're a former spy. You
Sure.
understand. You understand the intelligence world as well as I do. Probably even better. I don't know,
Well,
but
let's dive into that part of it because we're seeing an executive order, right? This leads to money being freed up. It leads to resources being moved. It
yes,
doesn't necessarily lead to a brigade marching,
yeah,
in through Boquillas or across the Chihuahua Desert to play. It might, right? But it doesn't mean that that's going to happen. So let's just and also because the cartel has power, because its power is connected to the Mexican government and, by the
yes,
way, our government.
yes, of
How
course.
much desire does the U.S. have to eliminate something as powerful as the cartel in a place like Mexico?
Well, I don't think that President Trump has a full understanding of just exactly what he's getting ready to open himself up for. I'm not degrading the president. I'm not going after him on any political forum. I'm simply saying that based on experience of dealing with people that have earned the ranks of where they're at today in our government, uh, Mr. Trump never came up that way. He came up out of a business world and bang, became a president. So my feeling is that he's going to be in for one hell of a headwind facing him on any type of an action he does against a sovereign country, especially an allied country to the United States that does what, over 30% annual trade with regard to what we import into this country. I mean, that's as big. It's not as big as China, but it's almost as big as China. So there's going to be a lot of political standoff, if you will, that's going to prevent like incursions of special forces teams going specifically at targets, things like that. I don't see that happening in the immediate future. I'm not going to rule it out at a later point as our government delegates with their government and decisions are made as to how to take out these cartels. I do believe the cartels are in trouble as a result of what's happening right now. The military buildup on our border. I'm sure that undercover agents working in that country are gathering intelligence like crazy right now and probably doing target identification, target location sites, things to this nature that both you
When
and
you
I are.
say that right there, like those stuff right there, because
Yeah.
this is important. It's not clear which way you mean, and because both are possible. The cartels can have their agents here identifying targets, looking at political influence they can gain, as much as we are going to look at them in the same light, right? So this is a game where it's not just, haha, we've showed up, right? Like there is a
No.
cost.
They're beyond that. Yeah. They're studying every single thing that's going on, and they're using all of their intelligent resources right now to assimilate into their defensive scenario that they're already preparing. Look, the
Right.
moment that that was announced that they had been declared terrorist organizations, a whole different world went into play for those cartels down there. And they're getting advisors and from people that are in high political positions in their government. And like you said, they have informants in our government. Of course, there's agents that are downloading to them this very instant. And there's probably a lot of cautionary warning going on, Pete. You and I have both been in very heated up countries in the past. Hell, I was captured in one. You served in one. I mean, we know how an enemy, if you will respond to a threat. They just get stronger. The threats mean nothing
Yeah.
to them whatsoever. And I'm telling
Yeah.
you, the cartels will evolve. They will start changing right away what we identify in the way that we would utilize our military and political resources to go after them. They're already on top of that. They're already figuring something out.
They
That,
have been for sure thinking about this. I don't know how directly they've been planning on it, but if they're like any other large organization, they identify a potential threat in President Trump getting elected. When he runs on, I'm going to hem up these cartels, these guys are like,
yeah.
all right, let's, because they're not just now reacting, right? They've had these, I would imagine, these things in motion. You know, money is not the problem for these guys. They've got the money to do it. The problem is how do we keep the money flowing? So when they do these plans, when they think strategically, and by the way, if ISIS can radicalize people in the US,
Yes,
guess what?
of course.
So yeah, how what does this increase the threat, you think, in the US with this posture? And look, good or bad, up or down, whatever. Does this increase the posture of the threat posture of Americans because the cartels are now going to respond to the threat towards them?
You know what, Pete? I think it's too soon to tell. I really do. This has only been 2 weeks into this now, where it has been an executive order that they are now terrorist organizations. And you got to realize this isn't just America that's dialing in on that. Now that they've been declared as terrorist organizations, our allies globally are already focusing on these cartels. You can bet on it because they're shipping drugs to their countries too. They're trafficking kids out of their countries too. They're doing every single thing they do to us and with us in other countries. Well, now they're a terrorist organization. That
Mhm.
changed the whole law enforcement scope of nature with regard to how they are being pursued at this point. But like I said, Pete, it's only 2 weeks into it. Right now, we probably have a hell of a lot of intelligence gathering resources going on before plans can be formulated to make an attack, if you will. I would not rule out the fact that we may go in there in some type of covert way and start hitting some of these top echelon cartel leaders. But look at the president of Mexico, that lady that stepped up and became president last year. My God, she's declared war on them full time. And I mean, she's making real damage down there right now. And there's a lot of division in the power plays that we see uh, in the news. I'm not connected anymore to where I can get direct information out of any of the cartels, but there was a time when we could. So I think that they're going to be tightening up extensively. I think that's part of the evolution of their way to survive. But you know what?
Yeah.
They're not going to stop getting stuff into these countries. They're not going to. That's not going to happen. You can build up that border as much as you want. They'll just find an alternative solution to the problem that we are now causing them.
You,
And
me, and Tim McBride did a show a few weeks ago, 2 weeks ago, talking about how much harder it is now to smuggle in. But if you have
oh
to
God, yeah,
smuggle something, right?
yeah.
What are the routes then? Like, what can you come up with just off the top of your head? If you were going to put in one of your fantastic fiction novels that you talk about, based on reality,
Yeah.
how does a cartel start to adapt? What do they drone things in over the border with dummy drones and a
Yeah,
drop off
yeah,
point?
that doesn't move the kind of weight that they're going to need to move, but that did work for a while. But it's already lit up on, and now that the border's so heated up, and there's probably a lot more surveillance that's technologically applied than there was sometime in the recent future. When Tim McBride and I were international smugglers, it was back in the 70s and 80s, and they didn't have the technology that applies today. But what's going to happen is in their evolution, they will simply find other trade routes instead of the standard routes that we expect to see on the Sonoran Desert or the Chihuahua Desert or any of these things. I believe that they will probably go more into maybe the Pacific Ocean side of transshipping things to this nature. I think the border is going to be it's going to be a temporary delay on a much bigger development of a new way of doing things, in my opinion. I'm not. I retired out of the DOJ in 2018, as you know, so I've been out of the game for 7 years. But
Yeah.
boy, I got to tell you, this is unprecedented. And declaring them terrorist organizations opens up every international law enforcement agency on the planet directly
Yeah.
looking at them now because they are in fact a threat, and they do smuggle in terrorists. They do operate and make lots and lots of money bringing in jihadis that are willing to strap a vest on and walk into a shopping center and blow themselves up. We have to look at those realities because they are the realities of today. But I think that the smuggling routes, the trade routes that they've been using, are going to get changed a lot more than what we anticipate or observe in the modern time that we're in right now, where smuggling still occurs on the borders. They're going to find alternatives to that. I believe that.
I mean, just we
They
know for sure that one area where it's just very difficult to keep things flowing and maintain
yeah,
security is with shipping containers. There's a lot of ways to get shipping containers
absolutely.
into this country, and they nobody wants to not look. Nobody wants their Doritos delayed, right? Or their
That's right.
rubber tires or anything that comes on a ship. And so, if you can get a container on a ship, you have a decent shot at getting something in. And again, it's bulk, right? So
Yeah.
you send 100, you lose 2 loads, you're still in business.
Yeah, and I remember being down in Panama working an operation where we were down at the docks, and the Panamanian ICE, along with American agencies, of course, took out a container full of Chinese, and the majority of them were dead. I mean, they were trapped,
Yeah.
they were isolated in that container, and they did not make it. And the ones that they brought out were extremely emaciated. They were very, very ill. That the cartels, the Chinese tongs or whatever, they don't give a damn. They're just counting numbers and dollars, and each one of those is a potential at that time $50,000 value. I'm sure it's more now. But yeah, they'll find other ways and other means, probably more through air transport. I anticipate that being another commodity that'll be utilized in the smuggling games. And I'm talking about full transport, full planes completely packed full of people, packed full of weapons, packed full of narcotics, that will simply find another way to clear any customs obstructions, things to this nature. That, and like you said, shipping the containers has been going on for decades. But they bring in 3,000 containers to Houston in a day, and out of 3,000 containers, maybe 200 of them get checked. So it's hit and
Right.
miss all along. It always has been.
Now
But
do
I don't
Seattle, now do Long Beach, now do San Francisco. Now, it's like, oh
exactly,
man, a
exactly,
lot of
brother.
containers.
But yeah,
Yeah,
it's
and
gonna be real interesting to see in the next
yeah,
few months, especially the redesigning of how the cartels approach this assault, if you will, from America.
Yeah.
This
Yeah.
is no joke. We got soldiers on the border right now, and we got more of them anticipated to go in. And they're shipping migrants down to Guantanamo. I heard they're going to ship as many as 30,000 down there. Well, Gitmo's going to fill up real fast. We both know what Gitmo is, and it's not that big of a place.
It's not that big of a
So
place. Yeah.
so what
Right.
other alternatives? Maybe taking some of these closed down military bases and turning them
Yeah.
into concentration camps or holding camps or whatever you want to call them on a temporary basis as they funnel these people out of the countries. And what Donald Trump did with Colombia last week was very interesting when they rejected two of his planes.
Yeah.
He said, "Well, fuck you. I'm going to go
That's
ahead and I'm going to go
yeah.
ahead and charge you 10% on the tariff." Colombia
Yeah.
came back and said, "Well, wait a minute. We'll just have our
Hold
planes come
on
and
now.
pick them up." Yeah, and I liked that.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's not get to, so there's a lot of good things in there, what you just talked about. So again, old military bases, it doesn't take much of an airfield to land a
No,
cartel owned C-130 full of people. And again, they are moving people and they're moving drugs, right?
that's right.
And yes, it will be seen, boop, boop, there's a C-130, and you
Yeah.
have to have a logbook, whatever. Doesn't mean that you know where it's going to land, because it's not going to land at Phoenix. It's not going to land at Santa Fe. It's going to land in the desert somewhere. And it's
That's
just
right.
not
Well,
right. And that's temporary.
I used to fly drugs into the United States, as you know, and I
Yeah.
went through the Yaqui Reservation back in the late 70s, half in Mexico, half in America, so we canyon fly it in. But now, of course, they have sensor devices, and those ways are ruled out. But when I was operational down in Acapulco, working one time on a joint DEA CIA operation, they were up in the mountains that night filming planes doing parachute drops of narcotics into the country and the hillsides there, and then the planes would go down there and clear customs. And that's what I think they'll probably evolve into, is operations like that, where they'll be parachuting narcotics or weapons or whatever they're trying to move into
Yeah.
the various countries that they're doing business in, not just America. But America has really created an interesting time and play, if you will,
Yeah.
and how they are going to continue to work and operate to the level they're at to this day in our company. I think that there's going to be some real glitches in the amount of weight that they're going to be moving
Yeah.
compared to what they were moving 2 months ago. I think
Let's
things are
look at the
changing.
policy side. So the cartel leaders can go, and they're a political body, right? So they can go to the boss of Mexico and
Yes,
say, "Here's how we make things." Because if it's hard on the cartels, they can lean on the U.S. and make it hard for them. They can also lean on Mexican government, and to topple that government would certainly be. Look, if I'm advising those guys, I'm like, how hard is it going to be to topple the Mexican president and put your own person in?
well, this isn't the 1990s or the early 2000s. Toppling a president in that country right now is not going to be what it could have been even 10 years ago. I think that
Mm,
this lady down there has a lot of power, and I think she has a lot of support behind her. And I think that Mexico in its entirety is tired of the cartels. I think that's been
mm,
growing and blossoming for quite a while. You take the agriculturalists, the small business farmers and stuff like that are having to give up 20, maybe 30% of what their annual crop brings in for them. And they're supporting all these farm families and everything else down there. And the cartels are cutting a significant wedge into that. Don't tell
yeah,
me that they wouldn't be happy to see the cartel in their region fall as a result of what they have to suffer through to stay in it. The people are tired. Pete, they're
yeah,
tired. You've been in
yeah,
foreign countries where you were operational in combat in the military, and the people do get tired. Then they start to cooperate, don't they? You were a spy.
yeah,
How did you get
yeah,
intel?
yeah.
People cooperating. That's going to happen
Talking to
in
people who
Mexico.
are fed up. Yeah, yeah, you
Talking to
definitely
people who are fed up.
yeah, they're
As it's,
emotionally charged, which also goes back again, like just because it's hard doesn't mean it's not easier to topple that than take on a brigade. And
exactly.
so if you do want to apply pressure there, right, you can. Like here in this country, if you right now today, if you're a Republican and you don't get on board with the boss's plan, you're going to get primaried, right? And,
Oh
and
yeah,
and this is not a political
absolutely.
statement. This is a statement of fact, right? If you aren't with the boss, hey, we're going to send someone to challenge your seat and unass you, right? And so that can be a long-term strategic program that the cartel might take. But also, you do have President Trump, who does like to solve things of business. The JCPOA went through, and
Yep.
that took a big bite out of what Mexico was getting in their trade with us. We made it a little more balanced. Maybe the boss, maybe he makes that a little less painful for Mexico if they comply. And that money can also filter in. Guess what? It can filter into the cartels as by design. It can say, "Hey, listen, we want you guys to lighten up on bringing people into our country, bringing drugs in. How about we cut you in on some of this sweet trade money?"
That's what we did down in Colombia. That's exactly what the CIA did and other agencies that became very,
No.
yeah. Yep, that's what they did. They said, we'll take the lesser of two evils and give us some significant busts, give us some significant seizures, and we're good to go. We'll let you keep the funnel flowing. But they
Mhm.
also got something more than that out of these organizations, these cartels. In Colombia, the cartels became high-level intelligence resources for our
Yep.
government agencies. They became the protector, if you will, on infiltration or insertion of terrorists, the possibility of nuclear-based dirty bombs, things to this nature. And Pete, you and I both know a lot of things happen that the public never finds out about. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
and imagine the amount of work that was done in salvation for our country's sake as a result of having a comradeship or relationship with the cartel. So, yeah, I think that's really an interesting point of view you just made there, Pete. And I think we will see some of that come into play because you got to give and you got to take in that industry. And it
Yeah.
takes both sides to make it happen. So, yeah, but I think that people are tired of the cartels in Mexico. I really do. And I think that right now, this strengthening of our borders, military threat, if you will,
Mhm.
the possibility of having special forces teams being inserted into Mexico and taking out some of these high level leaders and stuff, that's not beyond the scope of what I think in the near future we may even possibly see. But you've
Yeah.
got to you got to realize something. That's a sovereign nation. It is
Yeah.
It's an allied nation, and they look real down upon military insertion in their backyard. But at some point, who knows? Who knows? It's all going to
Yeah.
change. It's changing
I mean,
right now.
you think about our border, and as much as we want to talk about it being open and everything else, there are not that many U.S. officials there. There, you know, if you rounded them all up and put them in a field and had them count off,
Yeah.
it's just not that many people, right? And
Wait
so if
three
you put
months.
a constant, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
if you put a concentrated force and said we're coming across the border and we're Mexico going into the United States as a military force, you're not
Wow.
stopping it.
No.
You're not. You march through Naco with 1,000 dudes,
Yeah.
you're going to be in the United States. There's not enough people. There's a couple of border agents going to be like, "Oh shit, here come the Mexicans," And so we don't do that. They don't do that. Canada doesn't do that. We don't do that to Canada, and so we have this very easygoing in terms of military border. That's not the case in a lot of other places where there's a lot more attention focused on that. And so when you upset that balance, and I'm saying a brigade, but it's for anybody watching, a brigade is 5,000 people, give or take. But if they were there supplementing what's going on with the border, having a presence just in America, again, there's certain rules to do all that stuff. But the second they step across, there's a
That
problem. That means that
that's a
Mexico and
whole
the United
different thing. Yeah.
Right. That means that the Mexico and the United States at the highest level aren't getting along well enough to figure out how to give Donald Trump the outcome he wants for the American people.
I don't know. I got to tell you, in my opinion, observing what I see on the daily news, and God, I wish I was still connected to where I could get inside intel like I used to in the
Yes.
past, but I can't anymore. So that's a
Yeah,
realistic
yeah, yeah.
factor. But I'm watching him. I mean, daily. They're running up over 1,000 people a day in this country, and he's doing it kind of in a smart way because the people he's taking down right now are people that have warrants out for themselves. They're felons. They have history of violence. They have history of narcotics. And these are the target objectives that the ICE agents are working at in contrast with localized agencies that are now more and more ready and adaptable to come on board and help them round up the immigrant problem in the Americas.
Yeah.
And I've talked to Latin American people here that, sure, some of them are afraid, but a lot of them agree with what he is setting out to do.
Sure, of course.
It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's taking away from the decent families that do come here, that do strive to do good, to make money, to take back to their home in the fall of the year when harvest is over. And I think that we're going to see that those kind of permitted people will be able to stay and play at some point.
Sure.
Right now,
Yeah.
he's making a controversial impact, and it's just amazing what's going on. If I don't know how much of the news you do watch, but and I don't know how much we should all believe, but I do know this. I know that
Yes.
I'm certainly seeing radicalized change in some of the major metropolises of our country right now. And I am seeing the border getting built up with more and more military. And that presence alone will cause the cartels, it will cause them to rethink how they're going to approach the way that they're doing trade with the United States on an illegal basis. I don't see them continually trying to put wetbacks, if you will, and excuse me for saying that. I'm not prejudiced to any race, but that's a term that is used common down there on the borders. So I want to make sure your audience understands. I have no prejudice to anybody or any religion. But
is it possible for the cartels to send some kind of an envoy to President Trump or President Trump's team? I mean, can they be that bold to say, "Hey, we want
all
to
things
talk"?
are possible. All things are possible, and everything's on the table right now. He said that himself last week. All things are on the table. So that's a very good point you brought up, because that would be unprecedented. But hey, are we not in unprecedented times? Are we not?
Yeah.
This is like nothing. I mean, there's look at how instantaneously the flow of immigrant invasion, if you will, into our country stopped 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
dramatically reduced.
It's almost zero. It's pretty amazing if in fact you see, if in fact you take the time to see what is going on. But what's more interesting are the commentaries that are made by the law enforcement officials that have been on those borders. They're not all sold with this yet. The ones that have been down there long term, the ones that are in some of the Texas or Arizona cities that have had to deal with the invasion of the migration problem, they're not satisfied or ratified or on board as of yet. They're still cautionary because they understand evolution. Criminals evolve. They find other ways. Yeah. And I want to keep coming back to that, because that's already on the table with them. They're not going to give up. They're not going to give up $1 trillion plus amount of money that they make as a conglomerate of cartels a year into the United States for nothing. They're going to fight for it. They will fight for it. And I anticipate we're going to see violence in the very near future with regard to the Border Patrol and coming into contact with the cartels that are northern Mexican based. There's already been some gunfire activity that I heard about the other day, and taking pot shots at helicopters, shooting random firing weapons are being shot into the Border Patrol and the National Guard that are on the line there. There's also a lot of mines that are laid in the minefields down there on the Mexican side. And this is that's the cartels controlling zones and traffic in regions, things to this nature, where the independent coyotes, the people who smuggle people into America, are no longer, probably not even hardly in existence at all anymore. If you're moving people, if you're moving drugs in the northern Mexican region, you're only doing that under the authority of the cartel that's controlling that specific area.
Yeah. Let's just reiterate too, these are sophisticated operations. These are folks that have done this their whole lives. This isn't their first administration change that they've been through. They know that when it's permissive, they go out and they expand things, and they're looking to iterate and innovate how they do this, right? And so they do have a level of preparation for this. Let's go back to the envoy thing, because so I'm in a field far flung away in Afghanistan, and I'm talking to a farmer. Farmers are some of the wisest people in the world,
Yes, of course.
And we're trying. This is Taliban country, by the way. This is like where the Taliban originates from. Mullah Omar, who's an icon of the Taliban world, lives about 35 miles from where I'm standing at this point in time. Yes. And the farmer says to me, you guys want us to abandon the Taliban, but they're from here. Even if I'm not in the Taliban, they're from here. They're our people. They're our cousins. They're our uncles, our brothers, our fathers. And here's the thing, right? And so I'm just letting this guy talk. He's being real candid with me, and he's not mad. He's just saying, like, this is how it is. Like, your president is currently talking to the Taliban. So we know that they're going to be involved in the government before and after you guys leave. That's not going to change, right? And by the way, this is during President Obama's time, right?
Right.
And so I'm like, yeah, that's absolutely true. And then like the next day, the headline comes out, President Obama is talking with the Taliban and everything, right?
Yeah.
And yet when you write this report on our side, we're like, no, we're not. We are not talking to the Taliban. They're the enemy. And it's like, no, listen, we are. And by the way, who went to Camp David? Well, look at there. Donald Trump brought the Taliban.
The Taliban.
Right. And so if you find out that and I'm not saying this is going to happen, but don't be surprised if things like this happen. If you find out that President Trump is sitting at Camp David with members from the cartel trying to figure out how to work out a business deal, shit, that wouldn't surprise me at all. Heck, I expect it.
All things are on the table, Pete. All things are on the table. That is the statement that he has made publicly. So those kind of things probably are being, oh, I'm sure they are being considered. But boy,
Yeah.
oh boy,
Yeah.
you know, the next 2, 3, and 4 months, I think we're going to see so much radicalization with regards to these executive orders, passages that he's done. So many of them have so many other sideline effects that will ultimately affect the war that we have on the borders right now today with regard to the invasion of immigrants. That's dying down so rapidly. It's gonna manifest into something else, something more. And the cartels are going to go, look, this isn't working anymore. Okay, simple. We'll find something else. What else is of value? Ah, intelligence. That's of value. People are always willing to buy knowledge. And I think that we're
Yeah.
going to see a transition, if you will, on how they're going to evolve and self survive. But you are right about sending an emissary. I would not be surprised at all of seeing that, but I don't know that that's going to happen in the next week or two, the immediate future. But who the hell knows? We might have representatives that are operatives down there right
Yeah.
now that are already laying the
It's
foundation for
all a negotiation and
that.
everything's
Yeah.
complicated. I want to bring a different angle in. Okay. So we know that President Trump likes to use business to solve problems, right? We also have a China and cartel relationship problem that we have to deal with. So we've got to not only get the cartels to calm down, stop moving people, stop moving drugs, stop moving violence. We've also got to get them to want to back away from their relationship with China. And, again, this is like, maybe this is solved with car factories. Like, why don't you build Fords down there? We'll get Ford to agree to put a
That's
new factory in
interesting.
Culiacan. Because if you can get all those people in Culiacan with jobs, making that Ford money, oh my! And I don't know what's there right now, but if you had more of whatever isn't there, and
I
you
don't,
provide, that's
brother.
powerful for the cartels.
That's only if the cartels that control Sinaloa and Culiacan, Sinaloa is where I was based out of for 15 years.
Yeah.
Okay. Only if the cartels are willing to let them do that. You have to understand something. They're not going to give up
Right. We
that
would have
ground
to
and
sweeten the
that
pot for
power.
them, right? Yeah. Right.
Absolutely right. And the thing with China, where the hell do you think Mexico gets our fentanyl? Of course, we all
Yeah.
know it comes from China. And it's going to be real interesting to see how that comes into political pay. Because, like you said, Donald Trump is a businessman, and all of this negotiation is what he is. That's his lifeblood. Now,
Yeah.
whether you're for the guy or not, that I don't really care in this conversation, one or the other. But you got to admit that he's already looking at how the hell am I going to get attention and receive praise if I take out the Chinese, say the fentanyl trade. There's got to be something done there that's got to make it worthwhile for both countries. And what's his leverage? Tariffs. Tariffs. He's
Right.
screaming tariff, tariff, tariff. To anybody and everybody, it doesn't give him his way. Well, tariffs can even affect the cartels down there as other things increase in economic trade with America that start costing them more to do trade with us. That's also impacting the very people that are manufacturing those products, where the cartel is getting their percentage off of every one of those companies. So everybody, it's a trickle down effect. It hits every single person, including the cartels. So it'll be
Yeah.
interesting to note how they come back and how they manifest into the next phase of
Yeah.
evolutionary solution in the cartel trade.
Let's back up and dive back in again because there's all these different angles and echelons to look at. So, we know that back in the Florida days when the cocaine cowboys were going crazy, people were shooting each
Yes,
other, they're shooting each other
yes,
in strip malls. That's not tenable. That's not good for business for anybody. And that brings a lot of heat. And so when you bring these two entities close together in conflict, there's going to be violence. People are going to die, and that's going to cause people to pick up the phone and call their congressman or grab a right, whatever. Things get crazy, and that's
yes,
bad for business. The cartels are walking a line here where if they cross it, if another Mormon family gets whacked at the border, boy, all of a sudden you do get real heat. And then you're talking about Pete Hegseth, who's now going to be Secretary of Defense. He's like,
yeah,
"Oh, I can protect Americans in Mexico. Don't worry. Here it comes."
yeah,
Right. So they don't want to trip that thing where it's so dangerous in America that it's now worth it to come across because the
Yeah, but
cartel does not want that heat.
brother, look what
Mm.
happened when the Mormons were killed by those cartel members. What happened?
Did
The
it?
cartel themselves went over there and killed every one of the son of a bitches that killed those people. The cartels cleaned up their own. So they're
Yeah,
politically savvy. They understand what the kind of threat potential that has. And the fact that they themselves cleaned up the problem almost instantly, our
right.
government took notice of that. Is that not a negotiating base right there?
Oh, it sure is.
Yeah.
It
Hey,
sure
Mr.
is.
Cartels, will you work with us to take care of this?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
said, the violence medium, the flow of human trafficking into the United States, these are all going to be options on the table. But what I'm saying, Pete, and what I'm
Mhm.
feeling inside of myself is we'd better look out for what they're going to evolve into next.
Yeah,
They're
right,
already
right.
seeing that as a potential threat to their entire way of existence in their culture, the cartel
When we
culture.
go to places like Cabo San Lucas and Cancun and Cozumel, even Tulum to the south has a little American enclave down there.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
there's a lot of money coming in, a
Yeah.
lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
Those businesses, whether they're cartelled or not, they have influence. And if you start making it so that people don't want to go down to lovely Rosarito,
Yeah.
um, that draws attention. That's a beautiful hotel in Rosarito. That's just south of the border here in
I'm real
California.
familiar with it, brother. Real familiar with
It's
right
a
where you're talking about.
great spot,
Yeah.
right? And if all
I'm
of a
trying to think of
sudden they
that's the Rosarito Hotel, right? Is that what you're talking
yeah,
about?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it's
Yeah.
wonderful down there, right? And if all of a sudden people are like, "I'm too afraid to go down," that hotel dies. Someone and I'm saying that, and it's a tiny little place. It's beautiful, but
No,
if
no,
you
I
start
get it.
doing that with those local businesses, they will have an impact on what the cartel gets to do and has to do, right?
Well, absolutely, of course, and the cartels themselves understand the amount of heat drawn to them when the tourism industry gets impacted by kidnappings, murders, rapes,
Yeah.
crimes of violence, if you will. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm.
that's all. That's all something that I think is going to see a major transition right now because Mexico is going to be starving for all forms of economies based on the changes that are going on right now with regard to policies that he's enacted. I think he signed something like 200 executive orders in the first day. That's no
Mhm.
president has ever done that in history. Well, how many of those orders are going to impact the financial balance between ourselves and the trade nations that we're operational with right now? And Mexico, like I said, is 30, maybe 40% annual in trade with us in compared to other countries. That's a big number. That's a big trade. And then what about NAFTA? How's NAFTA going to stay into play with all of this? Because that's going to be another smuggler's paradise for bringing in narcotics and people and whatever else they need to get in. That's all
Yeah.
going to that's going to be a real transition, but it's going to be something that our border agents need to probably focus a hell of a lot more than they have even in the recent years
Mhm.
where we've done the x-ray machine development, things to this nature where they can scan them and spot abnormalities and pull them out and strip them down and find this what's stashed. But it's like the containers, it's all about numbers. It's all
Yeah.
about the permits too, by the way. And I learned this working in the industry when I was out
Mhm.
undercover. If a company has good standing and their permit is an old permit and they've been running through the canal forever, things like that, those are bypassed and never inspected. So those would be resources that would be under consideration now for the cartels insofar as how do we evolve into a way where we're having less losses, higher percentage of successes. And it's going to be
Yeah.
in ways that are already formally and established on a generational basis. A company that has good standing will be a company less looked at. Of course, they're doing some of that now, but more of that's going to come into
Sure.
play. Yeah,
We seem to always have some kind of drug crisis. We can go a couple of
yeah.
crises back. Right now, we've got fentanyl. Before that, it was opiates. Before that, it was crack.
Methamphetamine.
And
Yeah, yeah. Crack.
yeah, and methamphetamine. Yeah, all of these things. And before that, cocaine that was coming in and causing a lot of violence and everything. So it doesn't
Exactly.
seem like our craving for illicit substances here in America has been curbed. It's just hitting a different
Never will be.
ethnicity or a different kind of group. Right. Never will be. Right.
And then in the 1950s, Chairman Mao Zedong said, "We will take over the United States of America without firing a single shot through the decadence of their youth." Think about that. He said that in
Yeah.
1950s.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
look at the decadence of the youth and look at the division of our nation today.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wait a
Yeah.
half a
So
century. Yeah. Wait a half a century. We'll conquer you. The the
yeah.
uh, the morality issues and self-esteem issues and LGBTQ, the way that half of the world thinks it's okay and the other half hates them for it. I mean, all
Mhm.
of the division. And when you divide a house, that house will in fact fold at some point. And
Yeah.
bear in mind, democracy in America is only a few hundred years old. It's a new experiment here. Other countries in Europe and throughout the world have tried democracy, and it has always fallen to oligarchs, emperors, things to it always transitions, it always evolves, and primarily, unfortunately, it evolves to the rich, the wealthier are the ones that win. Well, these cartels are pretty damn wealthy too, so I don't see them losing. I just see that things are going to get realigned. They will shift. I think that I think the next 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 months is going to tell a very big story. An indelible mark will be made on the history of our relationship and our attempt to try and contain or control cartels. It's not going to happen. It just isn't going
Yeah.
to happen. They're going to
By the way,
change.
when you
Go
were
ahead.
talking about the history of democracies, like you're quoting Aristotle, who wrote that shit
Yes.
2,000 plus years ago.
Yeah.
So
And how
it is
accurate
hard.
was he? Yeah.
I mean, it does. He mapped it out. So we see these situations with the agreements between Mexico and the U.S. and look, we're seeing now because Syria has been toppled, because Assad is now left. Now you get the new
Right.
devil.
Right.
And so we don't want a new devil in
No.
Mexico. We want a
We
great, healthy partner in Mexico. The healthier Mexico is, the better we all do.
Yeah, that's
So
why I
we're
keep
trying to
reflecting back.
manage it.
I keep reflecting back to your statement about them putting together an emissaries to come up here and have a discussion. And I don't think you're far out on a limb with that, Pete. I really
Yeah,
don't.
yeah.
There has to be a ground of similarity and familiarity that both parties
Mhm.
can concede to and accept. And I think that that may be part of the evolution that I keep talking about with these cartels. It has to come into play at some point. I totally and
Yeah,
completely agree with you. So, yeah,
yeah.
it's all good.
And you don't gotta like or agree with President Trump to understand that the other day when he took on the Colombian president,
Yeah,
and that president shot back a thing saying, "I don't work with slavers," and then the
yeah,
next day he's like, "Yep, that's right,
yeah,
we'll take that
yeah.
deal."
How
And
funny
so there's a
that
lot of
is.
talk. Yeah, yeah.
How
Look,
funny
because
that
it's like,
is.
here's the cost. We will do this, and sure, we'll have to find our coffee from other sources. Have you heard of Jakarta? Like you think flowers are hard for us to get. It's an open economy, and if you
Oh
want to
yeah,
play with us, it's going to be. This is how President Trump thinks. And again, this is not an endorsement. It's just a fact. He looks at this and goes, "We'll figure flowers out. We got
yeah,
Kansas. We'll cover it in
yeah,
flowers and grow
yeah.
flowers there, and everybody will make money. So we don't need your flowers." So that influence on Mexico, it does matter. And if he can create, look, he's using business deals to stabilize, or at least tried last time, and will for sure try again,
Yeah.
stabilize the Middle East. If you've got Saudi Arabia and Israel about to partner up right before he leaves office last time,
Oh yeah,
almost
oh yeah,
anything is possible.
yeah.
Almost anything is
Anything.
possible.
Yeah, I think that you're not very far off at all with regard to your comment about some kind of a deal, if you will,
Yeah.
being struck between two common enemies. But you know what? I'm not going to underestimate this president right now either. What he's
Yeah.
doing, what we're seeing, there's a lot more that he's doing. You
Mm.
understand this. You've been in the spy business. Oh my
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
There's so much going on that we don't know. And I'm very, very anxious to see what the next 3, 4 to 5 months procure with regard to the border, uh, and what's going on down there. I think that
Let's use
we're,
this last little bit of time. I want to look into the future. Let's say that this works out, right? The cartels are like, hey, we want to do less trafficking of humans and drugs.
yes.
What fills that void? What fills that desire from Americans? Because they're going to get that shit from somewhere. And then what does, without making Mexico a narco state, how do you get the cartel woven into a more legitimate and healthier Mexican partner?
They're never going to be a legitimate and healthy partner. They're going to be the cartels as they are. But what they're going to do is they are going to involve in their industry. If the narcotics industry becomes too costly and too ineffective, they're not going to totally quit it. Of course not. But what they're going to do is find another alternative source. Human
Mm.
trafficking, for instance, 5 years ago, it wasn't nothing like it is today. It
Right.
wasn't as, yeah, I mean, it's grown exponentially, and they're making more money doing that than they are smuggling narcotics, or so I've been told by agents that I've been in touch with. It's unbelievable. They're going to do the same thing. They're going to find something now that can maybe come through from one computer to another. Intel, knowledge. These are the things that are worth a vast amount of money. The guy that has the knowing is the guy that will have the winning. And I think that that's where they're going to evolve. They're already starting to play with that right now anyway. And Pete, they probably have been for some time. Like I said, I got out in 2008.
Yeah, look, the same. I mean, we both have worked in this world and seen what happens. I've talked to warlords, legit warlords, and we want to work with that person rather than against them. And so, if there's going to be some bad outcomes, okay, because the other option is even more bad outcomes. And so, if you can get a warlord to manage their power in a way that's a little more friendly to us, even just a little bit, you've reduced the risk and harm in that area in theory, right? And so I've met these dudes. You talk to them, then you ask them how they run their shit, right? That's one of the things I get to do.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, oh, you're just a regular businessman. You have different means, different methods. Yes, you strong arm, but shit, so do we. You know,
so do we.
All these dudes behind me have guns. You have to talk to me because they got guns.
And that's a common ground that I was talking about earlier. That's common ground. And when you find common ground with your enemy, you and your enemy become an alliance. And that's what we're looking at right now. That's what we're going to be looking at in the very near future down there. It's going to be unprecedented. I'm absolutely fascinated with seeing what the next few months brings us. My God, look at 1 week brought us. Just amazing. But there's going to be retaliation, Pete. It's not going to all be bed and roses and agreements. There's going to be retaliation.
Yeah, things find a balance. Right.
They find a balance, exactly. And we're not there yet. But I'm sure that everybody, all the players that are in play right now, are certainly weighing out their options and how they're going to present their option to the table when the time comes. And the time's coming soon. I believe
want to ask you this next question carefully because I don't want you to get anywhere near anything that we shouldn't talk about, right? But when an administration changes, right, regardless of which one it is, and you have people in the field on our side of things, how much influence does that have when an administration rotates out, another one rotates in, and they're like, "Hey, we're playing by different rules," and it's
normally
more or less restrictive? How much does it change the job on the ground?
Normally, that's a moment of weakness because you've got a transitioning organization coming in that isn't already established and solid. That's what we're looking at now. But this has hi Richard. This has an optimum effect. This is different. This industry that he's bringing in right now, what he's cycling into power, is much stronger than the one that just went out of power. So I don't have a solution or an answer to that. All we can do right now is watch and see what's going to happen as a result of, for the first time in our country's history, seeing as many transitions happen in the first week of a presidency as we're seeing today. So we got to wait a little bit on that answer. I don't have it today, brother.
No, I get you. So I guess let's use a couple of proxies and see if they fit.
Okay.
100 years ago, a little less, a little more. Las Vegas was nothing, and then it was run by a bunch of hoods,
the mob,
and maybe still has that. A lot of baseball was run by the mob. It's good money in baseball. It's very possible that Major League Baseball will expand to Ciudad, Mexico, and there's always room for gambling. People love to gamble, and so if we did something to create a state, even if it is with the cartel, and we're like, hey, why don't you guys use these legitimate businesses, these legitimate vices, these pastimes, to create an off-ramp where we're like, here, we know you want to make money. Why don't you get some of this trade money? And how about a baseball team? And how about a couple of casinos? And we'll get Americans down there. And instead of having to push it in America, we'll just come down and see you and do a little bit. And I know there's already casinos and everything, but you can always sweeten the pot, build a bigger place, create a real economy in, I don't know, Monterey. They're Monterey, not ours.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that. And I'm sure those options are already being worked into play. But the acceleration of that type of an idea, if you will most definitely be coming into a very soon play because they have to evolve to survive, and they will evolve to survive. Just like our country will do the same. We will evolve to strengthen and fortify the rights of our citizens and to
Yeah.
keep our country free. No matter the cost, we will do it. So therein lies the negotiating table with it. Cartels are thinking the
Yeah.
same way. I was in Mexico smuggling marijuana before the cartels. I was
Hmm.
smuggling cocaine with the cartels. I was down there when the transition of the private syndicated organizations controlled their areas and later became drug cartels. That was like in the late 70s, mid to late 70s is when the cartels were formed, when the mafia families, the Mexican mafia families, became symbiont with one another and turned themselves into what they are today. And they are dangerous. Believe me, brother, they are dangerous. Their power outreaches their country many, many times, but they have to change right now. Things are changing on them. They have to ramp up whatever it is that they're going to introduce to survive, and they're going to have to put it into play real soon. So I think what you were talking about there will be one of many of the options that these cartels are looking at. And legalized business, why not? Of course. That's where they funnel their money to anyway. You know, hotel chains and gambling casinos, things to this nature have always been prominent for that. Great washing machines for your money. But that's
Yeah.
already something well known as a washing machine for their money. So what do they do then? Technology, AI, things to this nature. I think that they will strongly go into those directions because these are the things of now, and everybody's hungry for them now. And whatever the public is hungry for, Pete, that's what criminal enterprises try to thrive on.
Right.
They're hungry for drugs, they're going to get drugs. Back in
Right.
Prohibition, it was alcohol. You know, that's what they
Yeah.
were hungry for. Same thing right now. Everybody's into this this AI thing that's going on so rapidly. And oh my God, is it rapid? Remember, we did that interview here a few weeks ago with a lady who was
Yep.
a cyber tech that was written 3 books on it. And she said, yeah, I thought it'd be 5 more years. Now I'm saying 2. Well,
Yeah.
yeah, of course. And you know, when you've got truckloads, semi truckloads of money and you need to dump it into something, I can certainly see that those kind of things would be a great manifestation, jumping point, if you will, to the
Yeah.
transitioning of the survivorship of the cartels. And that's all I got to say on that.
It wasn't always Mexican cartels. It was Colombian cartels, and that whole
Yeah,
group there. What
yeah.
have the cartels learned a lesson from? Well, look, all those guys, but El Chapo hasn't learned a lesson. Now he's in prison, and Pablo Escobar is dead. Although he was incalculably rich, right?
Yeah.
So the money wasn't the thing that saved him or it got him things. But what has the Mexican cartel learned from those experiences?
Well, I think that they're learning. I don't think they have learned, but I think they are
Mm.
learning still because what happened to the men you just mentioned, they supernovaed. They became these giant things and they created this with no exodus. They didn't have
Mm.
a plan for the back door. They had a plan every day to get up and expand more. And that was the opposite of that which they should have done in order to survive that which they became. And I
Mm.
think that the cartels do take lessons from these type of mistakes. They're so very careful in so many ways. But now you also have radicalized youth down in Mexico that have broken off and formed their own cartels. So you have a whole different type of an environmental element that tends to cut away from the wisdom and the generational growth of the organizations that manifested themselves into cartelism.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I
yeah.
I think we're going to see some power shifts and power changes in those regards also. It's interesting. We're in interesting times, no doubt.
Yeah. You want to fire a couple questions at me, or do you want to wrap this thing up? What do you want to do?
Well, I think we're good. I think we covered everything. I don't really have any questions to ask at this point because you hit everything so perfectly, Pete. The topics that you brought out into this conversation are exactly what I was hoping you would bring out. I think that
Yeah.
our time and our wisdom of our years in the field and outside the wire, I think it's transitioning. I think that we're
Yeah.
becoming the old dinosaurs that we saw of the old dinosaurs in the 60s and 70s that now look at us and thought we were so great, like Tim McBride and I were talking about. Hell yeah, when you could move tons back in the day. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, technology took that away. So
Yeah.
same kind of a
Yeah.
thing that we see here. So yeah, I really don't have a question on it because you answered everything and said it
I've got
so.
one more for you, and
Go ahead.
you answer this however you want. Okay, so let's take cocaine smuggling Hal and put him in the cartels right now, and you
Wow.
see this current state of affairs, right?
Yeah.
What what's that hustling, that slick, God, that guy was so handsome. And he had it all. He had it all figured out. And now
Yeah.
this order comes down. How do you manage your business, man?
Well, what you got to do is you got to survive it first. And the way you survive it is through a discipline that's been enacted in you over years of experience. And that discipline in this time that's going on, I would call it survivorship. I would be more focused on trying to stay alive and not getting taken out as a result of not moving operationally fast enough for the bosses that are above me. Because the bosses that are above me aren't stepping away. They're not passing this down to the next generation. Right now, they're holding on to everything they've got because the moment they do step away, then that creates weakness, and weakness is death in that world, as you well know. So that would be my answer. My answer would be just to survive. If I was in that game today, and how the hell do you survive that game today? Boy, you better really be an asset of extreme value to make it, to survive it. Because
Do you send yourself as an emissary in your own behalf and be like, this is what this looks like for me right now? I mean, can you
yeah,
even speak for yourself, or do you just have to turn the numbers?
boy, that's a really good question. Things have changed a lot in recent years with the cartels and with the intelligence agencies that you were operating with.
Yeah.
I wouldn't know how to answer that because I would not.
Yeah.
I'm not fresh enough with it anymore. But that is that is the $1 million question, isn't it?
Yeah. 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 Because I mean, if you pick up your phone, if you take a
Yeah.
picture, if you post on social media, all of
Yep.
that can be scooped up. They call that OSINT, and it's just open information that's out there. And phones are easy to track. If you record a call, anybody who thinks their phone is in any way protected,
Yeah.
you're
How
fooling
crazy is
yourself.
that? Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. TikTok isn't the
Yeah.
biggest enemy, guys.
Yeah, everything that's said is recorded. Just every time you pick that thing up, whether it's on or not,
That's right.
everything's being recorded.
That's
This
right.
thing that I'm talking to now in this laptop, right? Everything's can be recorded. And so when you say things, man, oh man, right? So you almost just have to go dark, because if you went dark and everything was
But can you go
analog,
dark in this day and age? Can you
I
really?
don't know
No,
if you
you
can,
can't.
but if you do, you're going to be invisible.
Yeah.
They're not
Dark
going to see you, you know?
darkness is self-elimination from that of society. Okay. That's what darkness really is. You can't
Yeah.
walk out your front door without being hit on a camera on a street now. You can't do anything
Yeah,
without
no, it's true.
a satellite passing up above and picking up
Got
a
live video.
yeah.
Yeah.
That
We got
that's
live video of that plane crash last night, to include
yeah.
the feed from the tower as it was happening.
Yeah.
That's how unbelievable this shit is. The
And by the
actual
way,
live feed.
my condolences to all of those
Yeah, of course.
family members and people of the military that we lost last night in that very, very sad and upsetting collision out there. Yeah,
Here's
that's
a real quick note from Richard Caruso that's pretty relevant here.
yeah,
And you know, the being low key is a big thing.
yeah. I love Richard. He's a great guy.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think that I think you've covered everything with regard to
Then
what
let's
this topic was.
wrap this thing up. Everybody, this is the Break It Down Show. I would love it if you subscribe. BreakItDownShow.com is a good spot to go. You can hit the PayPal button and put a little subscription in, whatever you want. You want me to call you on the phone, go out to eat lunch with you, whatever it is. We'll make up our subscription together. But that money goes a long way in getting me on the road. I'm trying to get out and go do a couple of things in the next month or so. So hopefully you guys appreciate that. Even just checking in on YouTube is fine. But thank you all very much. This, by the way, is Dr. Hal Bradley. He's a wonderful dude. I love this guy. He and I work on his show called The Crisis Victory Show. You can go to crisisvictory.com, crisisvictoryshow.com, and just you can find him on Facebook. He's not hard to find. He's got 14 books out there that you can read about cartel things, his own life. And so definitely check him out. Hal, anything
Thanks,
else
Rich.
at all in closing?
Yeah, I just love very much that you're working. Pete is also my co-host on the Crisis Victory Show, and I tell you, I love him with all of my heart. He's a true warrior, a true server to all of you, and everything and every person we interview in our shows, we do it on a humanitarian purpose. And I love you for that, and God bless you, brother. Great show today, man. I enjoyed doing this with you, buddy, and that was a good topic. People are thinking these things right now. I'm glad you brought it out today. Take care, brother. Love you.
I'll be right back to you, Hal. Everybody else, see you tomorrow.